Next on our agenda, we do have to move on. So how is COVID changed? How has it changed the trajectory of work? So joining us for panel session number 1 is our panel moderator, chamber and panelists, Mr. Sam Pillar, CEO of Jobber, Dr. Eddie Wong, he's the Associate Dean of the University of Alberta, Asifa Samji, Senior Vice President and Acting Chief Human Resources Officer at Stantec. Now, Alan McDonald is the Senior Vice President, National Client Development for Global Public Affairs. That's a mouthful. And after building and running her own public affair firm for close to a decade, Alan offers a very unique perspective amongst public affairs professionals that is firmly grounded in the Alberta experience and the result of 25 years of working as an executive and advisor in both government and private sector. Alan is a director on the board of Edmonton Global, the organization I'm with, and is the vice chair of the Chamber of Commerce here in Edmonton. She's also a director of the board of Atlas Biotechnologies and Alberta Ballet. Alan is extremely professional, extremely busy, and we're so thankful for her time this morning. Alan, off to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Brent. And thanks for having me here today. I'm really pleased to be a part of this. We have got 3 great panelists, as Brent has alluded to. And the role of our first panel is to take a deeper dive and explore how COVID has changed the trajectory of the future of work. Some of this, of course, we've heard Stephen speak to. Our panelists are going to reflect on how COVID and remote work is disrupting industry sectors, temporarily in some cases, but in a much larger way in others. Secondly, they're going to consider how COVID, along with global geopolitics, has affected supply chains and in turn impacted job security and in some cases company viability. So Sam, I'm going to kick it off with you. Jobber, of course, works with thousands of small and medium-sized companies, predominantly in the service industry space. Can you spend a bit of time talking to us this morning about the impact of COVID situation?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everybody. I thought Stephen's talk was really great, and maybe sort of before answering the question, I just want to punctuate some of what he was saying near the end of his segment. I think, maybe as a backdrop here, and if for those who don't know, Jobber's customers, hundreds of thousands of people all over the world doing home services, but a lot of them are trades, landscapers, plumbers, electricians, roofers, et cetera, et cetera. We work with dozens of industries, and they run their companies using our software, which gives us a really interesting sort of position and access to really interesting data to understand how these companies are doing sort of in general, kind of year over year, but especially when we're going through something like COVID. But first, sort of, as a backdrop, evolution overall is a pretty slow process. And I was really interested to hear Stephen talk about this idea of, kind of skills, and especially kind of like technical skills falling off faster and faster and faster as sort of each generational cohort comes online. The half-life, today is probably a quarter or less than it was a generation ago. And the same is not necessarily true for the trades. I love this idea of trade durability and carpenters who have been there, done that, and been on the job site for a long time, being the one that you want to go to really understand the big picture of what's happening. And it is not beyond sort of, like, I'm not unaware of the fact that as a technology company, we are utilizing skills that have this kind of half-life dynamic to deliver products to industries that maybe don't have that same dynamic. And in fact, over the last few years, as we've started to use AI and machine learning in our products, we've been thinking a lot about the fact that, hey, this is, really interesting to think about with respect to the impact to our customers. Like, will our customers be disrupted at some point in the future by the application of AI and machine learning? And as Stephen said, it is highly unlikely that we'll see mass disruption of these industries due to AI and machine learning. I think, that's sort of, one of these elements that's pushing, kind of evolution. There are periods of time where the reconfiguration of society and work happens a lot faster. And so COVID has done that to us, remote work and kind of, people kind of fleeing the cities and going to suburbs. And through our data, what what we've been able to see is in April, for instance, the amount of work that was done through jobbers. So, hundreds of thousands of people doing, home cleanings or office cleaning or, plumbing jobs, landscaping work, lawn care, it plummeted for a very brief period. I think, during the time when everybody was terrified about leaving their houses and they were, maybe putting packing tape around the cracks in their front doors to not let the COVID in. And, but it came back with a vengeance immediately. So in May and June, the year-over-year growth rate for new job creation, so new work being booked for these companies across every geography that we track and almost every industry except for commercial cleaning, spiked to 17% year over year, which is incredible growth relative to baseline. And when we started to dig in and kind of look at some of the anecdotal feedback and evidence to understand what was going on, what we realized is that, our customers are, they build and maintain this like built world around us. We're all sort of sitting in whatever room, whatever space that we're in. And all of the stuff that's there is built and maintained by these kinds of trades, these kinds of businesses. And, as people sort of adjusted their lifestyles and reconfigured how they worked and lived, they needed to hire help in the form of trades in many cases in order to make those environments suitable to their new circumstances. Kids are at home and people are needing to create sort of, workspace at home. In the spring in particular, all of a sudden everybody's at home in their yards. People want to spend time, maintaining and making it nice because they're there with their families. And, now we're kind of thinking about what happens over the long term if this is a permanent shift. Wear and tear in these environments, things like, furnaces and plumbing and all of these elements of an environment that, typically maybe operates at 10 or 15% utilization, ramping to kind of 70 or 80% utilization because of the way that people are working and living, really is going to kind of change, how a lot of these services, that build and maintain these environments need to react and be available. And so I think it's, I mentioned earlier, I know the question is about sort of what are the industries of opportunity, and I would say overall it's trades, home services, anything that is really servicing that sort of built environment for individuals as they kind of change and reconfigure the way that they live and work are the areas of opportunity. I mentioned commercial cleaning. We saw that spike initially as office buildings were increasing the rate of cleaning and disinfecting, and then everybody sent their employees home and kind of shut that off, and so we saw a decline there. But I really think, I'm biased because this is my business, and I'm a big fan of kind of blue collar work and this idea that, anybody can be an entrepreneur and you can start one of these businesses, and kind of blue collar as a pejorative term, I reject roundly. And I think trades in the future is a major opportunity for people to do work and to build durable skills, and also for entrepreneurship and to some degree there's an opportunity to maybe solve some of the wealth disparity that exists by sort of democratizing entrepreneurship in the form of trades businesses. So that's kind of a lot of different dimensions. But
you gave us a lot to think about, Sam, and that was very interesting, and thank you for that. I'm interested just that notion of hybrid workplaces too that Stephen started to talk about, and how that impacts your space as well, and obviously remains to be seen over the coming months. But I'm just going to switch gears, and I'll come back to you again, Sam, but I'll switch gears for a second and turn over to Asifa. And Asifa, of course, is with Stantec as Senior Vice President and Acting HR. And Asifa, your perspective will be slightly different from Sam's in that you're in a larger professional services firm. And so if you could, from that perspective, talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of emerging sectors as a result of the pandemic, and also speak a little bit about, the working from home dynamic and what you're seeing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I definitely agree with both Stephen and Sam. I think trades will forever be important. But when you think about what's been heightened in terms of certain jobs. Obviously, healthcare professionals are always going to be required, especially registered nurses. Stantec as a company, when COVID hit, we've had a pandemic committee for a decade, and we were able to transition over 20,000 staff globally to remote working. So, that heightened need for cybersecurity experts, since the use of technology and remote working is going to be so incredibly important. So the IT field becomes that much more important. You look at schools, teachers. I think teachers are always going to be required, but I think now teachers who are able to operate in a remote setting and engage their students are going to be that's going to be their value proposition. That's going to differentiate them from other teachers. You look at coming out of COVID, hopefully at some point soon. I mean, we're going to be living with COVID for a while. So, a lot of companies, plants, construction sites, I think the need for health and safety administration is going to be at an all-time high as well, helping companies, develop and implement and enforce health and safety programs. So I think that's going to be really important. And then, for companies like Stantec, COVID has really impacted the global economy, and governments, municipalities, states, they're all going to be looking to, start creating jobs, because obviously job loss is largely concentrated in major industries where working from home was impossible. So, you look at the dollars that'll likely be spent on infrastructure programs, that's going to be important, which, gives rise to more need for planners, for engineers, for scientists, for project managers, people operating in that STEM space. So I think those are some of the areas that job seekers and students should really think about.
Right. Thanks, Asifa. Can you, I was just thinking about how many staff you've transitioned to working from home, and I'm just curious a little bit about, sort of some of the skills and training that you've provided to them, or that you think they might need going forward if this is a longer term sort of sustained way of working, whether it's hybrid or continued working from home. We're all getting very used to doing these sorts of Zoom calls, but there's a lot of skills that are required if you're going to do business development. You're going to have, transactionally, it's fairly easy to conduct business, but if you're trying to do things that are more strategic and creative, it gets a little more challenging.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think when, the initial response, the pandemic response, that, everyone just rolled up their sleeves, they operated from home, and we actually saw productivity and utilization actually go up. Everyone's adrenaline's going, everyone wants to, make a difference and make sure that, they're able to be productive. COVID fatigue has definitely set in. I think every industry will definitely tell you that. And so now what becomes really important is, well, how do we keep our teams engaged? How do we continue to build those relationships with our clients? So, I'm not sure if it's actually new skills that are required as opposed to, really enhancing existing skills. I think there's a bigger need more than ever on EQ versus IQ, right? So Stephen talked a little bit about capabilities and the technical skills being a little bit more shadowed. If you're working remotely, things that we've heard from our teams is people skills are kind of changing. You now need to really be able to assess body language, facial cues, expressions. Work-life balance becomes more important. People working from home are working longer hours because they're not commuting. They're probably staying in their pajamas from the waist down. So they're, dressed from the waist up for video calls. So, and there's so much emphasis on trying to keep people engaged. So you're on the phone a lot. You're having more calls. So when do you actually do your work? So finding that balance between, your long hours and still maintaining work-life balance, I think you have to be a lot more self-directed, and employers are going to need to make sure they've got the right people in leadership roles. That's now more important than ever, because you have to be able to have strong communication skills and strong engagement skills, staying relevant to your customers. How do you build personal relationships virtually. It's very challenging. So some of those things, the soft skills, the EQ skills, a different form of communication, not just verbal and written, but engaging type communication, time management, productivity, all those things are just, they go to the top in terms of importance. How do you work side by side with people virtually? So those are some of the things that we have to really consider.
Yeah, excellent comments, Stephen. We could keep talking about that, but I'm cognizant we're already supposed to be in our Q&A session, and I just want to turn our attention a bit to Dr. Wong. Good morning, Eddie. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Eddie, you're the Associate Dean International at the University of Alberta School of Business, and you spent years working with Alberta businesses and entrepreneurs, the Alberta government and others, trying to expose Alberta businesses to Asia. And I was hoping you could speak a little bit to how COVID, along with the geopolitical forces at play, have impacted the security of supply chains and the impact on the businesses that you work with.
Thank you. To open my comments with a very quick summary is that COVID, as well as the geopolitical issues that have emerged in the last year, have really basically accelerated the trends in supply chain management globally. Because prior to COVID and prior to the geopolitical situation, the emphasis of supply chain management in the world was on productivity and lean management. I think Stephen alluded to that. Lean management, productivity, cost reduction, and so on. And the issue of risk management came up only peripherally. And with COVID and the geopolitical developments that we have seen lately, the question of risk management has become front and center. And when we talk about risk management, we're really talking about many of the things that my other co-panelists have been talking about, what Sam and the Seaver and Stephen been talking about, and that has a lot to do with not so much changing the job, but really changing the task. Stephen talked about the fourth industrial revolution, and that really is the heart of supply chain management today. We call it Industry 4.0. And what that means is you're using technology to manage supply chain. You trace your transportation, you manage your procurement, and you integrate with your suppliers. All those things are supposed to help secure the supply chain, get more cost benefit out of the supply chain. And what that really means is technology will become more and more important in the supply chain world. And so the emphasis on technology is obviously very important. But Steve also talked about the human aspect, and Sam talked about the human aspect of supply chain management. And when we look at what's happening in the world today, the trend is toward getting to know each other better. The European approach to COVID and supply chain management is to actually secure the international relationships, increase collaboration, as opposed to saying that everything will come home. They realize that that's not going to happen. What they need to do to manage risk is to really have good, solid foundations in the supply chain, and that means relationship building as well. And when we look at the job market in Alberta, the relevance of all these trends lies with the fact that they all require employees going forward to develop attributes, not necessarily becoming soft skill focused, but in addition to the hard skill that we think would be important in terms of the technological area, the attributes that will be very, very important. Attributes such as adaptability, open-mindedness, and also a focus on learning in our professional lives. Those will become very important in the supply chain world. And they are important because, as Stantec illustrates, it is a company that is selling or marketing services around the world. And for people in Alberta, our economy is dichotomized in the sense that on the one hand, we have commodities, oil and gas, agriculture. And supply chain matters in terms of the transportation infrastructure and so on. And I think an example of that would be the need for a pipeline to export oil. On the other hand, we also have extremely robust service sector. And that's also the growth sector for the global economy. And fortunately, the supply chain requirement in those segments do not require physical infrastructure, but they do require a lot of human infrastructure, a lot of human skills, a lot of communication skills that the CFA was talking about. And that's where a lot of our young people should be focusing on. How do you develop these in addition to the technical skills? So with COVID, what it is that it has focused our attention on the importance of these skills going forward, as opposed to developing new skills. And as far as the geopolitics is concerned, I think that's something that's hard to predict. But what we can say safely is that instead of saying globalization is dead, globalization might take a different form. It would take more. It would take more of a form of regionalization. You know, we might see trade blocs coalescing together, trading more, and that also point to the need for cultural understanding, communication skills that would allow one to thrive in that particular trade bloc.
Right.
So that really is the summary of how supply chain would impact on Alberta job prospect and the kind of skills and also attributes that we need to develop here.
Thank you, Eddie, and lots to unpack there on the geopolitical side. That's a whole other day, for sure. So you know, we're going to move into Q&A here right away. So that's my warning to everybody listening in to get your questions into the chat. But I just wanted to give Sam and Asifa and Eddie a chance to make any final comments that you might want to make, any words of advice for folks that are listening in. Certainly heard a lot on the soft side, on the relationships on HR side of, or human side of things. Any other comments that folks wanted to make or respond to anybody else's comments?
Find that balance between high tech and high touch.
Yeah. I think I agree with Asifa, but also one thing I think we really need to understand is what's happening in the global environment. I think often we don't pay enough attention to that because that impacts on us, and I think COVID has really focused attention on that. Often our thinking, our strategy are really influenced by our immediate environment, which is natural. But I think with COVID, it really heightens the need to understand the global economy more.
Great, thanks. Great. Well, post-secondary institutions and how to emphasize EQ as a core part of learning to students and parents and employers. So that's that whole piece that you spoke about, Eddie, with respect to developing attributes. So I don't see any specific questions yet, so folks get them in. I'll maybe just ask a quick question around something that Stephen mentioned on the gig economy growing at 2 times the pace. And Sam, this might be more directed towards you. So as the gig economy is growing and people are looking to create work, maybe just talk a little bit about the skills or training required to prepare entrepreneurs to be successful in this space.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic, and there have been some interesting companies. I mean, I think when people think of the gig economy, probably the company they think of most is Uber. And you know, there's this idea that you can disintermediate businesses and create sort of like an aggregation of supply, or of demand rather, to feed to kind of, an automated supply of whatever the service is that's being provided. And I think in the case of Uber, it's a relatively undifferentiated service. So, deliver me from point A to point B. We've seen some companies come up to try and do the same kind of thing, for instance, in like, cleaning or sort of like handyman type services. And there's sort of a curve, a trust and skill curve. And somewhere along that curve, the ability to deliver those kinds of services in that highly aggregated fashion breaks down. For instance, it breaks down when you're inviting somebody into your home to clean. And so we don't see an Uber for home cleaning. We did see that in the past, and we don't anymore. Lawn care is maybe an area where you could see that kind of a thing. And I think that over time, probably with the help of technology, we will see the ability for some some of these services to be delivered in that manner, and for you to kind of come online to some sort of like a gig network for X service, and you could have the ability to deliver that service with the sort of supplemental technology that exists for you to do so at a high level of quality, high level of reliability. But really there is a difficult sort of barrier to overcome with respect to how the service is differentiated, how much skill is required to deliver it. For instance, I have a hard time believing that we'll see sort of a gig economy for bathroom renovations. This is a pretty sort of high skill plumbing, sort of some of these like certified trades that are required to do this kind of thing. You need to be able to monitor quality. So I think this training for gig economy is really kind of contingent on how much support is available in the form of technology or otherwise to ensure that consumers are getting a high quality, reliable service. I'm not sure that we'll see that extend too far beyond delivery services in the near future.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for that, Sam. I'm sure folks are going to want to explore that a little bit more with you, and they'll have a chance to do that right now, actually, in the breakout session.